She packed nothing. No suitcase, no overnight bag, no return ticket booked. Because she wasn't planning to stay long. She drove hundreds of miles to collect her daughter and bring her back home. That was the plan. Simple, straightforward. A mother coming to get her child. She never left that apartment. And the man who took her life did not flee in panic. He did not disappear into the night with nothing but the clothes on his back. He packed blankets. He packed pillows. He packed snacks and bottled water. He loaded both little girls into the back seat of a white Subaru, and he drove south, calm and deliberate, like a man who had already decided exactly what came next. He was a decorated United States Marine, a trained firearms instructor, a man who, by his own admission, had fired tens of thousands of rounds and could handle a weapon almost without thinking. She was 5 feet tall, just over 110 pounds, and she was unarmed. What happened inside that apartment on Main Street in Berlin, New Hampshire, on the night of February 29th, 2024, is one of the most chilling cases I have covered on this channel. Not because the facts are hard to find, not because the timeline is complicated, but because of what this case reveals about the space between what someone says and what the evidence proves. Stay with me, because this story does not go where you think it goes. I am your host. You're watching Midnight Case Files. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? And what time is it over there right now? I genuinely want to know, whether it is 2 in the afternoon and you are on your lunch break, or 2 in the morning and you probably should be sleeping, drop in the comments. I read every single one. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. We do not do clickbait on this channel. We do not rush through cases for the sake of a short video. We go deep, we go thorough, and we give every victim the full story they deserve. Now, let's get into it. February 29th, 2024. Berlin, New Hampshire. A small city in the northern part of the state, the kind of place where people know their neighbors, where a 3-story building on Main Street is just a building, and where nothing about a quiet weeknight suggests that anything is about to go terribly wrong. It is 10:30 in the evening when patrol officers receive a report of a crime and respond to a residential address on Main Street. Nobody on that unit knows yet what they are walking into. Standard procedure. Standard response. Their attention goes immediately to a ground floor apartment. They enter, and there, on the living room couch, they find 31-year-old Caitlyn Napsiger. She is not moving. There are no signs of life. Officers observe a visible injury to the head area. They secure the scene. They call for the medical examiner. The cause of death is later confirmed, a single gunshot wound. Here is what makes the scene immediately unusual. There is no forced entry, no signs of a struggle, nothing knocked over, nothing scattered, no indication of a fight or a confrontation of any kind. The apartment is calm. Still, almost ordinary except for the woman on the couch who will never move again. No firearm is recovered inside the apartment. Officers establish quickly that the unit does not belong to Caitlyn. It is rented by 37-year-old Dustin Duren, the father of her 2 children. And Dustin Duren is not there. Officers search the apartment, the building, the surrounding area. He is gone, and the 2 daughters, 4-year-old Eloin and 1-year-old Juan, are gone with him. The moment investigators confirm that 2 young children are missing alongside a man whose apartment just became a crime scene, the entire response escalates. A command post is established. Forensic teams secure the perimeter, and an urgent bulletin is prepared for Dustin Duren. By the early hours of March 1st, 2024, New Hampshire law enforcement activates the Amber Alert emergency notification system. The alert goes out to mobile phones across the state. It appears on highway message boards. A white Subaru, 2 little girls, a man named Dustin Duren. Police determine he left Berlin during the nighttime hours and headed south. The search begins. March 1st, 2024, 11 in the morning. A mother and her adult daughter are driving through the city of Keene, New Hampshire. They are not law enforcement. They are not trained investigators. They are 2 people going about their morning when one of them looks over at a car in traffic. A white Subaru. They look at each other. They think of the alert. And instead of driving on, instead of telling themselves it is probably nothing, they make a decision that takes real courage. They stay back, They maintain a safe distance. They call emergency services and begin feeding the dispatcher a live, turn-by-turn account of exactly where the Subaru is going and which direction it is heading. The vehicle turns off the road and pulls into a parking lot. Applebee's. Within minutes, 5 local police units and a New Hampshire State Police Patrol vehicle converge on that parking lot. Officers approach the white Subaru with firearms drawn. They conduct a tactical stop. Dustin Duren is in the driver's seat. He raises his hands. He tells the officers calmly, without hesitation, that his daughters are inside the car. He does not resist. He is removed from the vehicle and placed in handcuffs without incident. Officers immediately move to the back seat. Elowen, 1. Both little girls physically unharmed. A medical check at the scene confirms no physical injuries to either child. They're safe. And as Dustin Duren is transported to the station for questioning, the work of understanding what actually happened and why is only just beginning. While Duren is being processed, forensic investigators move in on the white Subaru right there in the Applebee's parking lot. They begin working the vehicle the way they would work any crime scene systematically, carefully documenting everything. What they find is extraordinary. Inside the driver's door pocket, they recover a Beretta semi-automatic pistol. The weapon is loaded. The safety is engaged. There is no round in the chamber. A preliminary ballistic analysis confirms the finding investigators had already been expecting. This is the same weapon that was discharged inside the apartment on Main Street. But the gun is only the beginning of what the car reveals. In the back seat and the cargo area, officers catalog the following items: multiple sets of spare clothing size for Duren and for both daughters, pillows and blankets, packages of dry snacks, supplies of bottled water, and then one item that stops the investigators in their tracks: a full-size desktop computer tower. Not a laptop, not an external hard drive. A full desktop tower, the kind that sits on a desk and requires a monitor and a power cable to operate. He had loaded it into the car and taken it with him. Investigators then turn their attention to Duren's cell phone records. What they find tells its own story. His phone was deliberately powered off on the evening of February 29th, shortly after the shooting inside the apartment. That single decision kept him completely off location tracking systems for nearly 12 hours. Now step back and look at everything together. A man who had just been through a traumatic, violent incident, according to his own account, did not run in panic. He did not grab a bag and flee. He methodically packed clothing for himself and both daughters. He loaded pillows and blankets into the car. He brought snacks and water. He powered off his phone to disable tracking. And he brought his desktop computer. The supplies found in that vehicle would have allowed a father and 2 children to remain on the road, self-sufficient, for several days. The defense would later claim that what happened in that apartment was a split-second, emotionally overwhelming response, an instinctive act driven by fear and trauma. But the contents of that car told investigators a very different story about the state of mind of the man who drove it. All recovered items were packaged and transported to a laboratory for further examination, including testing for biological traces and a full analysis of the digital data stored on the desktop computer's hard drive. To understand what happened inside that apartment, you need to understand the man at the center of this case. Because Dustin Duren was not a stranger to violence. And that fact, that specific documented, credentialed fact, became one of the most important pieces of this entire story. 1 week after graduating from high school, at 18 years old, Dustin Duren signed a contract with the United States Marine Corps. Over the years that followed, he was stationed at military bases in Thailand, South Korea, and the Philippines. He was deployed to combat zones in Iraq and Kuwait. He rose through the ranks to sergeant. And within the Marine Corps, he found a specialty that would define much of the rest of his life firearms training. He was good at it, exceptionally good. He earned advanced level qualifications in shooting performance and was assigned to instruct new recruits, coaching their technique, overseeing their weapons handling, teaching them how to control a firearm under pressure. By his own estimate, he fired tens of thousands of rounds during the course of his service. He was not someone who held a gun occasionally. He was someone for whom holding a gun had become second nature. Muscle memory, nearly unconscious. He received an honorable discharge, but the war came home with him in ways that would follow him for the rest of his life. Doctors diagnosed him with post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. He was granted a government disability benefit to reflect the severity of those conditions. He tried to build a civilian career studying audio engineering, working in California and then Nevada. But his health kept pulling him back from the edge of stability. Every time he found his footing, the symptoms would return and knock him sideways again. In the winter of 2018, he made the decision to return to his hometown in Minnesota. He described it himself as a necessity, a way to be closer to his parents while managing worsening symptoms. At the time of the crime, he was unemployed. His primary income was his disability benefit. He was a man carrying enormous weight, real weight, documented, medically recognized weight. And his defense team would later argue that this weight was central to everything. But there was another version of Dustin Duren, the version that his followers online knew. Over the course of 7 years, he built a YouTube channel under the name V. Duren, gaming content, live streams. To his subscribers, he was a happy, relaxed family man who loved his daughters and was open about their lives. He would give updates on Eloin and Juan. He would share small moments from daily life. Caitlyn appeared in some of the older recordings. He introduced her to viewers simply as mom. Streaming never generated serious income for him. What it generated was connection, a sense of community, a version of himself presented to an audience that showed someone who had his life together, someone content, grounded, in control. Caitlyn Napsiger was 31 years old. She and Dustin had shared years together. They had built a life, or tried to. They had 2 daughters, but by the time 2024 arrived, Caitlyn had reached a point of no return. She was done. The relationship was over. And the most pressing thing on her mind was her daughters, specifically Eloin, who was with Dustin in Berlin, New Hampshire, while Caitlyn was in another state. She traveled to Berlin. She had no personal vehicle, no bus ticket booked for the return journey, no rental car waiting. She was not planning an overnight stay. She was going to collect her daughter during a visit, and she was going to figure out the legal pathway to bring both girls back to Minnesota. Her Aunt Brenda would later describe Caitlyn's state of mind in the days leading up to that visit. Caitlyn was worried about Dustin's behavior, worried about the level of control he maintained over her phone monitoring who called her, what she sent and received. So she and Brenda put a system in place, a code word. If Caitlyn texted Brenda that specific word, Brenda would immediately call emergency services and then get in her car and drive 3 hours from her home in Hampton all the way to Berlin. It was a safety net, a quiet, careful plan between 2 women who understood that Caitlyn was walking into a situation that might require a way out. On the night of February 29th, Brenda was at home. She had not received the code word. She was waiting for a message that would tell her everything was okay, or waiting for the word that would send her running to her car. Neither ever came. The call she eventually received was not from Caitlyn. What we know about the final hour inside that apartment comes from 2 sources: Dustin Duren's own words during the interrogation that followed his arrest, and the physical evidence gathered by forensic investigators that either confirmed or contradicted those words. Duren described a confrontation. Caitlyn was on the couch. Eloin was with her. The tension in the room had been building. Duren says he attempted to take his daughter from Caitlyn's arms. He says that Caitlyn responded by pulling the child toward herself hard, and that he interpreted that movement as causing Eloin physical pain. In his own words, something shifted inside him at that moment. He described the mental shift using the color-coded threat assessment framework he had learned during his years in the Marine Corps. White means completely relaxed. Yellow is heightened awareness. Orange means you have identified a specific potential threat. Red means you act immediately to neutralize the danger. He told investigators he went a red. In that mental state, he said he no longer saw Caitlyn as the mother of his daughters. He did not see a woman on a couch. He saw a hostile actor. He saw someone holding his daughter against her will. And every instinct built through years of combat training and firearms instruction took over. He stepped toward his desk. He picked up the Beretta pistol. He chambered around. He fired. Once. The shot struck the right side of Caitlyn Napsiger's head. He described what he did as the elimination of a threat, as an act of protection for his daughter. He insisted, throughout questioning, that what happened should not be understood as a crime in the traditional sense. He had acted, he said, the way his training had prepared him to act. Then he packed the car, and he drove south. There is one detail Duren mentioned during questioning that stayed with investigators long after the interrogation ended. He said that right before he fired, he heard Eloin scream. And then in the very next breath, he admitted that he could not say with certainty whether his daughter screamed because of pain caused by her mother's grip or whether she screamed because she had just seen the gun in her father's hand. He did not know which it was, and he fired anyway. In October 2025, the case went to trial in New Hampshire, and the physical evidence presented by the prosecution did something that no defense argument could undo. It directly contradicted Dustin Duren's account of what happened on that couch. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy testified to a specific finding: the absence of powder burns and soot deposits on the skin around the wound site. These are markings that appear when a firearm is discharged at very close range. Their absence told investigators something precise and measurable. According to the experts' conclusions, the muzzle of the Beretta was positioned at least 3 feet, roughly 1 meter from Caitlyn's head at the moment the trigger was pulled. 3 feet. That is not point blank. That is not standing directly over someone on a couch. That is a deliberate measured distance. Using that ballistic data, investigators built a reconstruction of the sequence of events. What the reconstruction showed is this: at the moment the shot was fired, Duren was not locked in a physical struggle with Caitlyn for possession of his daughter. He was standing some distance from the couch. Eloin was already in his left arm. His daughter had already been separated from her mother. And then, with his right hand, he raised the weapon and fired. The threat he described in such careful, clinical, military language during interrogation no longer existed at the moment he pulled the trigger. Dr. Natalie Robertson, the physician who examined Eloin after both children were recovered, testified that the 4-year-old showed no bruising, no marks, no physical evidence of the rough grip Duren had described. The only thing Eloin complained of was a loud ringing in her ears from the discharge of the weapon fired beside her. Caitlyn's Aunt Brenda also took the stand. The defense had constructed a theory that Caitlyn and Brenda had been coordinating a secret, nighttime plan to take both girls without Duren's knowledge, and that this alleged conspiracy had triggered his response. Under oath, Brenda denied it entirely. She had been home in Hampton, 3 hours away, waiting for a call from her niece. She had made no moves toward Berlin that night. The code word, the safety system she and Caitlyn had put in place, was never sent. When prosecutors delivered their closing arguments, they laid out the physical reality of what happened on that couch with unflinching clarity. On one side of that confrontation, Dustin Duren, a United States Marine Corps veteran, a man who had survived combat, a trained firearms instructor with advanced qualifications, a man who, by his own admission on the stand, could operate a handgun through muscle memory alone without conscious thought. On the other side, Caitlyn Napsiger, 31 years old, 5 feet tall, just over 110 pounds, unarmed, sitting on a couch in an apartment that was not hers in a city she did not know well, without a car to leave in. Prosecutors told the jury that this was never about protecting a daughter. This was about a man who could not tolerate the reality that a woman had decided she was leaving and that she intended to take their children with her. The jury deliberated for only a few hours. Dustin Duren stood in the courtroom as the verdict was delivered. Guilty on all counts. Second-degree criminal homicide carried out knowingly. Second-degree criminal homicide committed with reckless disregard. Reckless conduct involving a deadly weapon and endangering the welfare of his daughters, Eloin and Juan. Every element of the defense strategy, the self-defense argument, the hostage rescue framework, the combat conditioned response theory was rejected. Completely, the jury concluded that none of those explanations were consistent with what the physical evidence had proven. The formal sentencing hearing was scheduled for 10 in the morning on December 11, 2025. Under New Hampshire state law, Dustin Duren faces the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence. Eloin and Juan were placed in the care of relatives in Minnesota. Caitlyn's family established a memorial fund in her name, intended to support her daughters as they grow up without their mother. Authorities in Berlin described the tragedy on Main Street as the result of a deliberate decision made by a man trained in combat, who ultimately turned those skills against the unarmed mother of his children. Caitlyn Napsiger went to Berlin, New Hampshire, because she was a mother. She had a plan. She had people in her corner. She had a code word and an aunt sitting by her phone. She was trying to do everything through the right channels, trying to protect herself and still get her daughter back without it becoming something worse than it already was. She was being careful. She was 31 years old. She had 2 daughters who needed her. She had a whole life that was supposed to keep going. The investigation happened. The trial happened. The verdict happened. But underneath all of it, under the ballistic analysis, the forensic reports, the testimony, and the court records, there's a woman who drove to another state for the most human reason in the world. And she deserved to drive home. That is the case of Caitlyn Napsiger. And that is what we do here at Midnight Case Files. We go all the way in. We do not skip the parts that are hard. We tell the whole story because the whole story is the only thing that does justice to the people at the center of it. If this case stayed with you tonight, drop a comment below. Tell me which part hit you the hardest. Tell me where in the world you are watching from and what time it is there right now. I want to know who is on the other side of the screen, staying up and paying attention, because real cases deserve real witnesses. If you watched this far and you're still not subscribed, hit that button right now. We are here every week with a new case, told with the depth it deserves. Hit the like button if this video earned it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this story. And I will see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.